In our first story, Behind Mansion Walls.
He's going to break me. He's going to spend all of my money.
Insatiable greed has an explosive end.
We saw this vehicle that was almost entirely destroyed.
And the death of a wealthy father reveals a sordid secret life.
They discovered a list of prostitutes' names.
The most shocking part of this entire story is that a father and a son come to this end. Money can do bad things to people, inside and outside.
I'm Christopher Mason. It can take generations to build a vast family fortune, and only one to tear it all down. Every prosperous parent fears the curse of the wayward son.
The city of Naples, Florida. You don't have to be rich to live here, but if you're not, you're probably cleaning a rich person's house.
Naples, Florida is considered one of the most thickly populated places in the United States of millionaires. It's a place where the very wealthy congregate.
It's a luxurious world of manicured mansions, hired help, and recreational sports for the idle rich.
It's expensive to live here, or especially live at a country club where you have golf. Golf is a very expensive thing.
So, who are the millionaires of Naples? Retired executives, big shots who worked hard all their lives to buy a sprawling mansion in the sun and plan to spend their golden years playing golf and tennis.
Life in Naples seems picture perfect. That is all about to change.
I was driving home, and all of a sudden an announcement came over the radio.
Anna Kirkendall remembers the day she lost close family friends. In the strangest circumstances.
Everything they said about the car blowing up, and that there was a mother and a son and the daughter. And it had to be them. I mean, that's all I could think of. It has to be the Bensons.
On July 9th, 1985, a car explodes in the driveway of a mansion on White Violet Drive.
The car looked like someone had taken a can opener and opened the top of the vehicle after the explosion. There were bodies laying at the scene. Mrs. Benson was laying on one side. Part of her face was blown away. It was a very gruesome scene.
Margaret Benson, age 63, is killed instantly. So is her youngest son, Scott, just 21. Her daughter, 40-year-old Carol Lynn, clings to life with horrific burns.
I've just lost my best friend, a young man that I had raised since he was, he was 11 or 12 years old, and I cared deeply for Scott.
There's another survivor. One member of the family wasn't in the car when it exploded. The eldest Benson son, Stephen.
When we arrived, Stephen was sitting on the front steps, smoking a cigarette.
Detective George Nowicki was at the house that day. George has seen it all. But to him, this crime scene looks different.
We saw this vehicle that was almost entirely destroyed. All the metal was blasted down, so it was obvious that whatever exploded was inside the vehicle. We theorized that there had been two separate devices.
The Benson family has almost been destroyed by a bombing. A violent end to a wealthy dynasty. Margaret Benson is the family matriarch, a widow worth millions.
When her husband, Benny Benson, died at the age of 60, she inherited the $10 million that he had. Her father, Harry Hitchcock, was worth close to $100 million. The real money was with Harry Hitchcock.
Their fortune comes from the family business, the Lancaster Leaf Tobacco Company.
The grandfather was almost legendary by virtue of all the money he had made. His son-in-law then took over. He made even more money. They had more money than they knew what to do with, and they went on spending sprees.
They bought boats, they bought exotic cars, they bought 2 houses. They were very well off.
After her husband's death in 1980, Margaret retires to sunny Florida. And where her money goes, her 3 adult children are sure to follow.
Very well, how are you?
Carolyn was the beauty queen. She was the center of attention for the family.
Now a divorced mother of 2, Carol Lynn still turns heads at society gatherings.
Scott, he was good looking, he was outgoing, and he was attracting a lot of attention going to tennis tournaments.
And even more attention from his habits. Chasing girls, crashing expensive sports cars, and snorting cocaine.
And Stephen just seemed like he was the one that was the very ordinary, one that was not exceptional in any way.
Stephen is married with 3 kids. A nerdy electronics whiz with a string of failed businesses behind him.
Stephen was a spoiled, young, rich kid who was given too much, and when he didn't do properly, he was not disciplined.
All 3 of the Benson children have grown up spoiled rotten.
I mean, how spoiled was Stephen? At the age of 10, for a birthday present, he was given an 18-foot inboard motorboat. Carol Lynn, a few years later, was given, for her 16th birthday, a brand new red Ford Sunliner convertible.
So who wants a wealthy, slightly mixed up family? Blown off the map.
When somebody's killed with a bomb, it's usually for political reasons or for organized crime type reasons.
Turns out, there may be a link to the Florida underworld. Scott Benson, the tennis player, is a rich kid with rich tastes in parties, ladies, and drugs.
There was a possibility that it was a drug-related killing, that young Scott, by virtue of his social drug habits, had been involved in buying and perhaps not paying for drugs or some problem of that sort, and that this was a revenge killing.
When that theory becomes a dead end, police turn to surviving witnesses. Carol Lynn is in critical condition, too severely burned to speak. So investigators focus their attention on the other survivor, her brother Stephen.
He said that he was crossing right in front of the vehicle and just right in front of the windshield when the bomb went off.
So let's get this straight. He was crossing right in front of the car, but he didn't suffer a scratch? Detectives find his lucky escape quite perplexing. They soon discover that Stephen Benson is a very odd man.
For weeks after the crime, he drove around in his van that had flesh and blood on the side of the van from the explosion. It had to be his mother's flesh and blood. He didn't even bother to wash it off.
They can't lock you up for baffling behavior. But when it comes to uncovering the secrets of the rich, there is one rule of thumb. Follow the money.
We discovered that Margaret had been financing the activities of Stephen Benson for some time. It appeared monies that she had been giving him and from the businesses that she had funded were being used basically by Stephen as his own private bank account.
Stephen is quietly swindling his own mother to fund his hapless business ventures to the tune of $2 million.
She left town with strict instructions to take care of some bills with signed checks she left him. Bills should have been $2,000 to $3,000. He writes checks to himself instead for $50,000 to $75,000.
But why would Stephen want to kill the golden goose? The answer lies in the simple, deadly math of inheritance.
If everyone had died, he would inherit all of Margaret's $10 million.
Could Stephen Benson be so ruthless? Only one person can answer that. His sister, Carol Lynn, clinging to life in the hospital. 3 weeks after the explosion, she can finally talk. So, what kind of story does she have to tell?
Help me! Help me!
She recalled making eye contact with him. She wondered why he wasn't coming to help her.
It's been 18 days since Carol Lynn Benson cheated death. 2 bombs turned her family's car into scrap metal, killing her mother Margaret and her brother Scott. There's another survivor, her older brother Stephen.
Stephen isn't in the car when his family is blown apart. Good luck or good planning? Detectives discover Stephen wants more than the silver spoon in his mouth. He's after the entire set of cutlery.
Stephen knew there was money, and so Stephen wanted his share of it. Margaret would say, Stephen, you can't buy a car. He'd go buy the car. Stephen, you can't buy this expensive home. He wouldn't argue, he'd just go buy it.
Stephen was constantly starting businesses. He was constantly trying to emulate the success of his father and aim for achieving some sort of parity with his grandfather, and he wasn't able to do it. He wasn't that type.
Mother, the technology these alarms...
Stephen would start a business, and he would start building it up, and he'd have a lot of interest and be working along with it, and then all of a sudden it'd just flop. He'd be doing something else. Then Margaret would take the loss on that business, then she'd start on the next business. It'd build up, and then plop, it would go.
Stephen's hand has been in his mother's pocketbook for years. By the summer of 1985, she's finally had enough. Margaret Benson starts investigating her accounts and doesn't like what she finds.
Margaret says he's going to break me, he's going to spend all of my money.
Stephen soon discovers that his mother is planning to cut him out of the will.
I think Stephen realized that the financial bonanza that he enjoyed all of his life was going to come to an end unless he took some kind of radical action.
Does Stephen's radical action include murder? Really? Would he cash in the lives of his own family to keep the money flowing? One thing he didn't count on was a survivor.
Okay, Miss Benson, I need you to explain to me exactly what happened.
The family was supposed to take a trip to the site where they were going to build a huge home here in Naples.
Why don't you drive?
Stephen began placing everyone in the vehicle in particular locations.
Come on,
Stephen, you're being silly. He doesn't drive.
According to Carol Lynn, Margaret was sitting in the right front seat, and she thought it was very strange because Margaret usually likes to ride in the back.
I can't wait to see you.
Scott was sitting behind the steering wheel.
What the hell's going on?
Normally, Stephen would be driving.
Are you kidding me?
Come on, Carol, let's go. Come on.
Carol Lynn realized that it was just a short trip.
It's okay.
What's wrong with you?
I'm looking forward to it.
She thought it was very strange.
Carol Lynn says that just before the family leaves,
I'll be back. Give me 1 second.
Stephen forgets something and rushes back to the house.
Well, what is this about? Oh, that boy is so infuriating.
He knows I get car sick. I don't know.
Oh, this is ridiculous.
She told us, she said she didn't hear a sound. She said she just saw this huge ball of orange mass coming at her. She could not hear anything, and it was just engulfing her.
She looked up, and there is Stephen, and he comes out, and she looks up. He could see Carol Lynn was alive.
She recalled making eye contact with him. She wondered why he wasn't coming to help her. He ran back in the house because he knew that there was a second bomb.
Carol Lynn's revelations make it very clear. Stephen Benson is now the prime suspect. But police need some hard evidence. They find it in the wreckage. Fragments of plumbing pipe.
Our bomb expert was able to piece together the pipe almost like a jigsaw puzzle. It was a 4-inch diameter pipe, 12 inches in length.
A statewide search of plumbing supply companies leads to one particular store. And where is it located? How about just around the corner from Stephen Benson's office?
And they said, yes, they sell 4 by 12-inch pipe, and in fact, they had sold some recently.
Can I just get your signature there, sir?
I don't need to sign. I'm fine. I need to get going.
Sir, it's store regulation.
And we were very fortunate.
I need you to sign it.
They made purchasers sign invoices for their purchases.
Thank you very much.
Stephen Benson gives a fake name, but his palm prints don't lie.
I looked at the two documents side by side, and even somebody who is not a fingerprint expert could look at the two sets of prints and say, it has to be him.
One more piece of evidence helps detectives complete the puzzle.
As a teenager in high school, he had experimented with small explosive devices contained in small tubing. With his electronics background and his explosive background, it was a natural choice to accomplish the murders.
Police now have the eyewitness, the evidence, and the motive.
That is what's going on.
They arrest Stephen Benson and charge him with murder. 12 months and 5 days after the bomb blast, Stephen stands trial. Florida is transfixed in horror. Star witness for the prosecution is his own sister, Carol Lynn.
You know, her brother had just tried to snuff out her life with a pipe bomb. And when she discovered the facts surrounding that, she became very angry, very bitter.
I think it was a tremendous emotional ordeal for her because even though she suspected Stephen, I think she really hoped it wasn't him. And I've heard to this day that, you know, she feels that that he was just forced by circumstances to do it and that he really didn't want to do it.
Stephen Benson is found guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder. Escaping the death penalty, he's sentenced to 50 years without parole. Even today, he still claims he is innocent.
Even as a teenager, Stephen Benson always wore the finest clothes and drove an MG to high school. In prison, he complained about the size of the squad car that had taken him into custody and asked whether he could be served poached eggs for his breakfast.
Up next, behind mentioned walls.
He was very wealthy. He entertained a lot of women. He had a lot of parties.
A father and son, torn by love and hate.
He had been hit by a whiskey bottle.
But who is the angel? And who is the devil?
He had a temper. That temper would come out when he was drinking.
The airplane pilot called. He was waiting for him at the airport to take him to the Monday night football game to watch the Cowboys. And we knew if he didn't show up for that, something was terribly wrong.
We got a call from law enforcement. They had found a deceased person's body in a home in Horseshoe Bay.
When the well-to-do are murdered, it tends to attract a lot of attention. A violent death demands an explanation, especially when the deceased is as popular as Texan millionaire Charlie White.
This murder just shocked the place. This thing just does not happen. Especially doesn't happen in Horseshoe Bay.
About an hour out of Austin, Texas, you'll find the exclusive resort community of Horseshoe Bay.
Horseshoe Bay, it's just a quiet place. It's small. We live here for a reason, you know, because it's not big city and it's not hustle and bustle.
It's also away from the hustle and bustle of the less fortunate.
You had your waterfront, you had your swimming pool, you got your tennis courts.
A lot of very well-heeled people, a lot of condos, million-dollar homes.
There's a lot of movie stars and athletes and actors that live out there.
King of the Bay is a man no one forgets meeting. Charlie White.
If you were in a local bar in town, he's liable to walk in and buy rounds for everyone.
Charlie White was a man of means. I couldn't tell you how many millions he had.
He was very wealthy. He had inherited a lot of money from his parents.
With that inheritance, he continues to build the fortune and starts his own chain of beauty schools.
That became a real cash cow for him, very successful.
He bankrolls a life of good times for everyone.
He had all the toys and all the appearances of somebody that had a lot of money. He had a plane, he had a beautiful house, he went on trips.
He went to the Dallas games, all the home games. Same with the Spurs. I mean, he was just an avid sports person, and that's what he used his jet for.
Nearing 70, Charlie retires, but not to head out and tend to the roses. Oh, no. Not when there are young ladies to entertain.
Charlie loved beautiful women, and beautiful young women especially. But doesn't every man like beautiful young women?
Charlie's passions were women, money, and sport.
Women/sex, money, and just having a good time.
Now, the party is over.
It was a very extensive, very violent scene. The investigators found teeth, just stray teeth.
He was found with a green extension cord wrapped around his neck and beaten pretty severely. He had been hit by a whiskey bottle, which knocked his teeth out and cracked his skull open.
Well, the first thing we noticed was pretty brutal.
District Attorney Sam Oatman is called to the crime scene.
It wasn't robbery, it wasn't anything where someone had broken into the house. Right away, my thoughts were it was someone who knew the individual.
Well, actually, I thought that yes, Charlie could have had some enemies.
So who would want the colorful King of the Bay dead?
Depending on who you talked to, Charlie was either the greatest guy in the world or just a horrible, horrible person. Charlie had a temper, and apparently that temper would come out when he was drinking.
And Charlie's young girlfriends, many of them are being paid by the hour.
One thing that they discovered in the home was a list of prostitutes' names.
A list of names. Busty Dolores.
It also had these really colorful descriptors for them.
Bondage Butter.
Physical attributes and characteristics, and pet names, nicknames, things like that.
Thousands of them.
They thought, well, maybe a prostitute or somebody involved in prostitution had done this to him for some reason.
The great pirates of the Caribbean in the 17th century had a saying, "Dead men tell no tales." But they'd never encountered a dead man with a pacemaker.
Through the examination of the pacemaker after the autopsy, they could actually pinpoint the exact time of his death.
So the investigators were looking into who he was with that day, around that time.
Well, there we here.
Charlie White died at 9:38 p.m. In his house, police find another clue. A receipt from a visit to a local mall just 2 hours earlier. A mall with security cameras in its parking lot.
They also had a piece of CCTV footage of him in a car in a parking lot with an unidentified man. So they knew he was with somebody. It was a man, but the video just didn't reveal exactly who it was.
A shadowy figure with a man about to be murdered. This mystery gentleman has some questions to answer.
Where were you?
Things just weren't adding up.
Isn't that you? Isn't it?
When millionaire playboy Charlie White is found brutally murdered, it shocks the wealthy enclave of Horseshoe Bay, Texas.
Never saw Charlie lift a hand to anyone. No, that wasn't his style. He could yell at you, but, I mean, that'd be it.
Carol Noble was a good friend of Charlie White, with fond memories of the exuberant millionaire.
He loved to share his money. Many times we went out to dinner together and he would want to pick up the tab.
Others in town aren't so sure about the big spending, big talking Texan.
Very few of them said, well, he's a good guy, but he had a temper. Lots of people were either for him or against him.
He had a lot of friends in the community, but there were definitely people that he had run-ins with.
Yeah, Benson.
Charlie's, he's an enigma. I mean, he's hard to pin down.
If you saw him in public on the surface, you would have thought, man, what a great guy. He's having a good time and he's picking up the tab for it. But if you talk to his family, most family members, you would readily agree that there was a dark side to Charlie White Sr. He had 5 kids, and most of them had a tragic story to go with their life.
The wealthier Charlie got, the more he lost.
Charlie's wife left him in 1975. Then his 11-year-old daughter was hit by a car and eventually died. His son Lance killed himself with a shotgun. Another son, Ronnie, disowned the family and lives as a recluse in the California desert. And then there's the youngest son, Darren.
Darren was a chip off the old block. He was a ski instructor. He was a handsome young man.
Charlie White Sr. relied on Darren's good looks and good personality to pick up good-looking women.
Charlie paid his way, took him places, took him to dinner, bought him vehicles. I think he only came for the money. Without mother and father, Darren White had nothing, and made very few attempts to do it on his own.
I believe Darren disappointed his father because he had never really accomplished anything.
I think he definitely wanted Darren to understand I've got the money and I can spend the money if I want to, and and I can cut you off if I want to.
What I knew of Darren was always after his father for money. Give me this, give me that.
Money. That's what gets a rich man killed.
When I first heard that Charlie was dead, and that he'd been murdered, pretty much, my first thoughts went to Darren.
The Texas Rangers are thinking the same way.
Yes, well, like I told you,
Darren is called in for routine questioning.
You murmurs, please.
The investigators were speaking to Charlie's son, Darren.
You know, whatever you say.
Some of the answers that he was giving, some of the chronology, the timeline, things just weren't adding up.
We know you were with your father that night.
1 hour into the interview, Charlie's wingman is caught in a lie about his alibi.
Isn't that you? In the car park? There's your father. Looks like him.
Tripped up, he takes a fall.
Isn't that you? Isn't it? Well, yeah. It's me.
It was Darren with Charlie at the mall, just 2 hours before his murder. And now, Darren can't hold back the truth.
You've got to understand it. It was self-defense.
Oh, I'm listening.
Self-defense? From a 73-year-old with a pacemaker?
He kept calling me names and abusing me.
It seems Charlie White never was much of a family man.
I think the relationship was very demeaning for Darren. Charlie White would call him things like a dumbass, a loser, a failure, those kinds of things in front of his friends. And usually it was followed by a pop on the back of the head or a drink over the top of your head. Anything to demean Darren, Charlie White Sr. was all about that.
Some people say that Charlie had it coming, that he just pushed too far and somebody pushed back.
Look, that day, my father and I got into a big fight.
Darren begins to tell police how a father and son trip to the mall ended in brutal murder.
Darren claimed that the last night that he and his father were together, they got into a real big fight that lasted all evening.
They went home, and when they started to unload the groceries, it sort of erupted into a physical altercation. Charlie started throwing groceries and started throwing things at Darren, and it pretty much escalated. Charlie White ran to the cabinet where they kept a shotgun.
And that's when Darren said that he felt threatened and scared and panicked. Next thing you know, his father is on the floor bleeding with teeth all over the floor. Darren admitted to bludgeoning him to death with a whiskey bottle and then tying an electric cord around his neck and then around his feet.
A brutal fight to the death. Father and son, him or me. Plausible, possible, but true?
It didn't look like it was a two-way fight. The story wasn't adding up on that point.
I want you to tell me.
The son of millionaire Charlie White is under arrest for the murder of his father.
I tied it around his leg.
I can't imagine what it'd be like to be killed by my own son.
I wrapped it around his neck about 5 or 6 times.
That your relationship was so bad that it came down to that, it's hard to imagine.
Darren White says it was self-defense, a fight to the death. The evidence says something else.
Darren specifically said that his father started throwing groceries at him as the fight escalated, throwing canned goods. Well, the crime scene showed all the groceries stacked up on the counters. Nothing was thrown, nothing was amiss.
Okay, let's take a look.
Detectives think the truth is written right on Darren's body.
So the investigators took photos of Darren. They had him stripped to the waist, and they took pictures of his fingernails, of his knuckles.
There was no indication that there was any kind of a fight, that any bruises or any broken bones or any lacerations that Darren had on his body.
That's where he threw the groceries at you?
Yeah, in the bottom.
In the bottom?
Yeah.
They didn't see any marks on him that would suggest that he was fighting for his life and needed to defend himself. So his story wasn't adding up on that point.
Turn around.
Didn't look like it was a two-way fight.
And with that evidence, Darren White's future hangs by a thread. On trial for murder, the jury must decide, did he kill his father in a fit of sudden passion, or was this bitter revenge served cold?
He might have had in mind all along that if just one more time and I'm going to hit him. To strangle the man. So to me, that's more of a premeditated thought process. Once you've hit him with a bottle and then you want to continue the process, all of a sudden deciding, what have I done? Gee, I'm sorry, or whatever you might do if it is, in fact, a sudden rage situation. He had a vehicle to get out of there and leave, and he didn't have to commit an act of murder. Charlie, he didn't deserve to die. That was not Darren White's right to kill him.
Over the years, Charlie had given Darren many reasons to hate him. But one was a little beyond the pale.
Darren said that Charlie would make advances on his girlfriends and even slept with his girlfriend one time and would brag about it.
Oh!
Hello, Daisy. Thanks for the picture.
Darcy. Hello, Charlie. How are you?
I'm terrific.
Charlie one time suggested that they have a threesome between him and his son, Darren, and his son's girlfriend, Darcy.
We have some fun.
I'm Darren's girl.
Darren and Darcy turned him down on that one.
Darcy testified in court to the fact that Charlie White Sr. had propositioned her.
She has another story. The first time Charlie meets Darcy's father, he makes an offer of friendship. Would he perhaps enjoy the services of one of Charlie's prostitutes? Charlie's treat.
Darcy's father is horrified and rejects the offer. Does the jury see a tragic son tortured by a monstrous father, or a lazy slacker lashing out for the spoils of wealth?
I think certainly that money was a contributing factor to this. I think there probably was some dysfunction between the father and son and the entire family, but my opinion is Darren would not have been there if Charlie had been poor.
We put on a case whereby, yes, he's guilty, but look at the facts and don't give him life.
The jury doesn't believe that Darren killed his father in a fit of sudden passion, but they still go easy on his sentence. Just 20 years in a state where many killers go to death row.
I would have liked to see Darren get more time. I think many of us, friends of his, would have preferred to see him get a life sentence at least.
Darren said that he felt relieved, that he finally felt safe after he killed his father. You know, that this thing was welling up for years and years and finally broke. There was something between him and his father, something that wasn't good, something that's very, very toxic. I don't know if anybody doubts that. I don't think anybody can doubt that.
I feel the most shocking part of this entire story is that a father and a son come to this end. Money can do bad things to people, inside and outside.
The sons of the rich should be blessed heirs with opportunities to burnish the family name and fortune. But too much money in the bloodline can be a poisonous inheritance. Stephen Benson coldly coveted his family's wealth, whatever the cost. While Darren White desperately desired what money couldn't buy, his father's love. Wealth can pass down the generations, only to sink in a pool of blood at the hands of a wayward son. Till next we meet, behind mansion walls, I'm Christopher Mason.